I'm Sarah Berg, and this is the Women in Media podcast. Today, my guest, who's been kind of hard to nail down for this interview, um, is someone I've been chasing for a while. Andrea Bain, the newest co-host of CTV's The Social. She is a television personality, an author, and a fellow podcaster. How are you?
Not so good. You know what? I'm sorry for having you chase me. It's been a little insane, but I'm so glad I'm here. Thank you so much for having me.
How's your last 6 months been?
Oh my! First of all, what 6 months? It went by like this. It's like it's been 6 months. It's
Yeah.
been crazy. It was like I hit the ground running, and it's just been wonderful, but just insane. Where I'm like, I don't know what day of the week it is. I don't know what month I'm on. It's just crazy, but it is so rewarding and so much fun.
You're showing up on Saturdays being like, wait, I thought we had a show today.
Oh my God. On Thursdays, there have been times where I'm like here on a Tuesday and I'm like, yeah, so the weekend. People are like, it's Tuesday. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, no, it's been crazy.
So just to back it up a little bit, because
Mm.
I don't know where you're from, I don't know where you grew up. When did you, decide you wanted to be in the spotlight? Was there like an early moment when you were a kid
Mm.
where you were like, I think I might like to be on TV or have an audience?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, aside from performing for my stuffed animals, there was no, as a child, there was no way I was doing that. I like to dance and like be like a typical kid,
Yeah.
but it wasn't some big dream of mine. I grew up in downtown Toronto and then moved to the east end of the city, probably when I was about like just before junior high school, just for junior high school.
Cool.
And then immediately moved back downtown because downtown is where my heart is. But it was in my okay, so I went to university like a lot of people where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I was had a major and then I took this class and one of my professors actually asked me to be a part of a panel for this TV discussion. And the girl he wanted, who was a really smart girl in class, she was too afraid to do anything on camera. So then he turned to me because I'm always flapping at the gums and he was like, will you do it? And I was like, sure, whatever. So I get there and it was in that moment, as soon as I sat down on that panel, the light bulb went on and I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And after that interview, I spent a lot of time talking to the woman who was interviewing us. And I was like, how do you get into this? What did you do? Talk to me about this career. And that's how it started. So I finished my degree because my parents would have killed me if I didn't.
Yep.
And then immediately did the journalism program. And that's how it all started.
Very cool. And where was the journalism program?
At Humber College.
Very nice.
I was going to
Very
say
nice.
Slumber Cottage, but that's not nice.
Uh,
Yeah, so that's where I did my program after I
ve-
finished university.
very cool. And what was your first gig where you were hired with an audience?
Ooh, hire with an audience. Such a great question. Because there was so much. What people don't realize is that my career did not do like it wasn't a straight path. It was like crooked, and I went around. I actually started off in news, so I didn't get in front of an
Me too.
audience for a very long time. Like for a very long time. And while I was doing news, I was also volunteering as a reporter covering entertainment stuff for Rogers. So getting in front of an audience that didn't come until probably I don't know years in. Because in the beginning I thought I was going to be Katie Couric.
Okay.
And I was doing, long form journalism. I was on Kids Beat on Global. Anybody that's it's an old reference. But I worked at Global. But my first job, and I love this job so much. But I was a summer intern at CFTO News, and it was so much fun that at the end of it I cried. Like my last day, I was sobbing. I was like, "This is what I want to do with my life," and they were like, "This girl's a lunatic."
No, I
But yeah,
get that. I get
right.
that. The summer gigs were the best
It was the best,
coming
but it
up.
was also for the first time because I'd been working since I was 14, but this was the first time I was doing something that I really loved. And I
Yeah.
could feel myself just being so excited, regardless if I was just doing some small story or doing research for another reporter or helping an anchor out. And I just knew. I'll never forget that because I was like, what is this water coming out of my face? Like, what am I doing? Act like you've been to a place before. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it started. But the audience, gosh, I'm trying to think. I can't even remember because again, the whole trajectory of my career, it wasn't a straightforward thing. But yeah, no, not for a
Yeah.
long time.
I've always had, one foot in like the journalism side of things and one foot
Mhm.
in like music or entertainment. And
Yeah,
I found it really hard to pick between the two because I had a love for both of them.
yeah.
What was the moment where you knew that you wanted to step a little more into one over the other?
It was out of actually frustration. I had surprised myself, and in the beginning, I didn't have any really strong desire to be in front of the camera. I wanted to work in television, and what I wanted to do in the beginning of my career was take every single opportunity just to figure out where I fit. and what was my strength. Was directing my strength? Was producing? Was it reporting? Was it news? And so I kept myself, and this was at the advice of some of the teachers that I had at Humber College, to keep myself open and not to be so laser focused on only wanting to do one thing. So in the beginning, I was just trying different things to see what worked. So in the beginning, I did a lot of behind the scenes. I was a producer for a very long time. And then I actually produced on a show. Um, Sorry, I'm pausing because I don't want to say the show. The show's still on air. I was like, and it was just in that moment. It wasn't the show. It was just my experience. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I do have to listen to people who are like, well, why don't you try doing this? And that was being on air. And I stepped away from that job. It was the first time I ever quit a job without having another job. And I was terrified, but I also just knew instinctively that I'd come to the end of the road of
Yeah.
doing what I was doing. And so I made that move, got myself an agent, and that was it.
Okay. Now, is this a point in your bio, if I'm
Mhm.
following along correctly, where you start building your own brand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's when I
Yeah.
started. Because when you come from behind the camera, now it's like, well, who are you? Because that's the first question people are going to ask you. Who are you? What do you want to do? Your resume, people like to look at your resume and really pigeonhole you. It's like, well, your resume says you've done a lot of news. And I'm like, yes, but I can do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I think I was just trying to establish myself, especially when you're younger and people you're already younger and you don't know exactly what you want to do and who you want to be, but also people are trying to at the same time put you in a box of like, oh, you're this person or you're that person. So it was a little bit of a struggle, but I also had the help of my agent who was really instrumental in saying, we're not doing this, we're going to try and do this, let's forge ahead in that direction. So she was super helpful.
And I find with the social, you kind of get to cover a variety of things where you get to
Yeah.
combine that love for journalism, the love for entertainment, and your own brand because we
Mm-hmm.
want, four different characters on that show.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, like, the energy you bring to that show is so friggin' refreshing. I love it.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? For me, this is the way I've always been. I didn't realize it like it was a job,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And people are coming up to my parents all the time and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Andrea is," because I'm a bit of an introvert extrovert. Like I'm not. If you meet me in the street, I am not yelling at the top of my voice about my opinion about things. I'm like a quiet person, and so people are just kind of going, "Oh my gosh, this is Andrea." My parents are like, she would never shut up. Like you don't understand. Like, this is her all the time. So now
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
look, it's a job. So it all worked out really nicely.
Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
tell me about your first impressions, like, because you were guesting for a bunch of shows with CTV before this happened. What was your first
Mm-hmm.
impression of the social, like when you met the ladies, even if it was during a different time?
You know what? Everybody was really nice. Everybody was really sweet, but I don't think I really was thinking about them. I was just so like heart beating out of my chest, nervous
Yeah.
because it's always nerve wracking to be on live television.
Yeah.
This show was an established show with a strong audience, and it's kind of like I liken it to doing double dutch. Anybody who's done double dutch, it's just knowing when to jump in because you know that if you're sitting there, you do have to have a point of view. You have to say something, but at the same time, you're dealing with people who have been doing this for a long time. They're comfortable with
Yeah.
each other. So I was more concerned about making sure that I had something to say, and then I got into the conversation and I didn't sit back and just kind of find myself watching like I was on my sofa. So
Yeah.
that was my main concern. But everybody was like super pleasant and wonderful. So it was easy.
And what's one of your proudest moments on air with the social so far?
Oh God, one of my proudest moments. You know what? My proudest moment is not on air.
Okay. Okay.
My proudest moment is something that I have not shared with anybody. Since I started working on the social, I worked on a lot of shows. I've done a lot of different things, and you start a new gig, and you see how it goes, and shows get canceled. But this was the first time I've ever worked on a project where women are coming up to me and hugging me and telling me, thank you for being there. Thank you for representing us. We are cheering you on. Like I got brought to tears at a birthday party because all of the women at the birthday party just surrounded me and they were like, we love you there. You're doing such a good job. You represent us so well. So that has been the biggest surprise and also the highlight of this entire experience has been the women who have been strangers, by the way, not women I know,
Oh
strangers
my
who are just coming
gosh.
up to me and just like some of them with tears in their eyes, just being like, thank you for being here, thank you for representing us. I love what you bring to the show, and that has been better than any outfit, any segment, anything. It's just been the gift that
Yeah.
I didn't see it coming, but it's been the best part.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, my mom loved your cottage ranch. Why are you packing up just to go to another house? But
You
what's
listen. The
But what?
cottagers, I ruffled some feathers with that cottage business, okay? But I was speaking from the heart. That's why it resonated with people because I was like, for years, I just kept my mouth shut about this cottage. You know, the cottage? We're all going to the cottage. And I was like, please don't invite me. I don't
Oh
want to
my
go.
god.
And it was hilarious. Like, everybody, I was everywhere I went to, like, yeah, the girl who's saying that stuff about the cottage. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I said it. I said what I said. Yeah,
Oh my
that one,
god.
that
I
one
think my mom was
got the nerve.
feeling it so hard because like my parents just got a cottage in the last 2 years, so it's like fresh. And she's like, "This is a lot of work. Why are we doing this?" Right?
I could have told her that. I could have saved all the time and money and effort. I'm like, what are we doing here? This doesn't make sense. This is to relax.
Yeah.
So yeah, that cottage rant really got people. That got under their skin.
So give me a nod to a segment that you're really proud of too. I love
Oh
the behind the
gosh,
scenes
you know
moments.
what? Um, a nod to a segment. I'll be very honest with you. It is, oh God, how do I put this without? It's overwhelming because every day it's a new set of topics, a new set of guests, and it's like after a while you're just running through them where you kind of have to. I haven't had a chance to really stop and go, okay, so what happened? Like today we had Sarah Nurse on, who is a professional hockey player who
Oh
comes from a
yeah.
family of hockey players. So it's wonderful to have those women on. And then a couple of days ago we had a young woman who did a documentary, a very young woman who did a documentary about the history of the Black community in Vancouver and what happened to them. So there are all these little moments of people sharing their stories. We also had a great conversation today about homelessness and how it's being addressed and how people need to open their minds about what's going on across the country, not
Yeah.
just in our city of Toronto. So to say that the one specific, I have a hard time because we've had so many wonderful people come on and share their stories and enlighten us that I find myself just afterwards, I want to continue that conversation and I will
Right.
harass them backstage and be like, yeah, and about this and about that. So it's
Yeah.
there's no one thing that it has stuck out to me. It's just been wonderful. And as you mentioned, it's like it's the best of both worlds because if you're a journalist, if you're a newsie, you love those types of stories. You love those human interest stories. At the same time, we can talk pop culture. I also watch every single award show. So that's also fun. So it's a nice melting
Yeah.
pot of the two, right? So yeah, to pick a favorite, I can't even think of one right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well here, let me reframe.
Okay.
A moment that you were really proud of the way you used your voice and your platform.
Oh. Um.
She's like every day.
Every day I just drop gems. No, you know what? Anytime because I think for the first time on the show there is a host who's not married. Um,
Fucking preach.
for
Yes.
the first time. So I don't want to. I don't want to feel like I'm like carrying like I'm leading people in this charge about stay single. But I do feel like it's important to change the narrative about the stigma, especially for single women, about being single.
Hell
So a few
yes.
weeks ago, I had a conversation about like it's the stigma. If we could get rid of the stigma, perhaps we could help a lot of women who are stuck in not just women, women and men who are stuck in very unhealthy relationships because they're so afraid and they don't want that stigma. They'd rather be miserable. There's a lot of people think this way. They'd rather be miserable but be with somebody than be on their own. That's how much they fear being single. That's how much of a stigma it is in their family or their culture. So anytime I can have those conversations and be real with people, it's like while you're busy trying to set people up and wonder why are you single? Why don't you just take stock and be like, are you happy? Is this a good
You
relationship for
good with
yourself?
you. Yeah.
There are too many people. There's a woman right now on TikTok with a 50-part series about this idiot that she married, and I'm like, yeah, well maybe if your objective wasn't just to be married and you weren't so afraid of being single, maybe you wouldn't have found yourself with this person who fabricated their entire life. So I always, whenever I have those moments, I'm really proud of it because I can feel the audience kind of go, yeah. And I get so much feedback of women saying, I just left my 35-year marriage and it's the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
And being single is not half as scary as I thought it was. And I was like, yeah, you're pretty awesome.
Well,
Yeah,
you did build a brand around, single girl problem. So a book, a podcast,
yeah,
and to be honest, I had never listened to your podcast until I was prepping for this interview. And like
mhm,
the one thing I will just say off the top of the podcast chat is, in the first episode, because I listened to the very first one,
mhm,
you know how it takes a moment for hosts to get comfortable and find their footing, especially when there's co-hosts around. You guys
yeah,
were like just first episode off to the races, so natural, so good. And a lot of what you're saying even right now about, if women could just, realize that being happy could contribute to a whole new way of living
yeah,
before they have a partner. You said a lot of that stuff in the first few episodes that I listened to, and it's again, the word refreshing comes to mind because it's just not the society that we participate in right now most of the time,
No,
and as
and
a
it's
single girl, I feel it.
yeah. And sometimes, you know what the funny thing is about that book? Years ago, when okay, so this is I don't know if people know, this is my third national talk show.
Okay.
The first one was called Free Takes. It was on Slice Network,
Okay.
and I was the single girl, and we would always have these discussions. And we had about like relationships and stuff. We talked about a lot of stuff, but we had a guest on. I wish I could remember this woman's name. And after her interview was done, she did a great job. We're in the hallway, and she grabs me by the wrist and she goes, "You have a book in you." And I go, okay, lady, it's been nice, but no. And mind you, I was also backstory. My first job was I was a page in a library for like my entire high school career. So I take being an author as a very serious thing. And so she was like, "Yeah, there's a book in you. You're gonna write a book." And I was like, "Lady, I ain't got nothing to say. Like, what am I gonna write a book about?" And she was like, "No, no, change that mentality. There's a book in you." So she planted that seed back then, and it took me a while to kind of figure, oh, what am I going to talk about? I kind of would want to be an author. She did kind of tap into something. And then I heard somebody say, sometimes your mess is your message. And then I was like, because of all of my girlfriends, because I'm that girl who would like teenage years, I always had boyfriends and stuff, but my 20s were really strange because all of a sudden, without warning, all of my friends were pairing off and getting engaged and getting married. And I was like,
I'm with
what's
you.
happening? How come? And there was a lot of stigma, a lot of comments, family members, everybody's coming on it. And the rest of my life was great, but this was the part where they made me feel insecure about something that really it's a nothing burger. But I used that, and that was the reason. That's the main reason why I wrote the book about it, because it's like, yeah, if I'm going through this and everybody's harassing me about being single, I can't be by myself. So put my journalist cap on, did the research, and wrote the book. And it was during the book tour, because I was having all these great conversations with women. They're like, "Yeah, I wish this conversation would go on longer. You should have a podcast." And I was like, "Bing, all right, I'll do it. I'll talk to
Yeah.
you." So that's how that all came about. But yeah, it's been awesome.
So will you go back to that podcast? I noticed that the episodes were a little bit
I
older.
Oh my god, I did that years ago. It was, you know what? I have a bad habit. I don't know if about you, but I have things on I have vision board stuff. Like at the beginning of a year, I don't have resolutions. I just have things that I want to get done.
Yeah.
And I have a bad habit of like, once I've checked that, I don't circle back. I don't circle the block. I'm kind of like, okay, wrote the book, did it, started the podcast, did that. That's living on. I thought they would take it off. They just have it living there. That's so there's an audience that keeps on like listening to these episodes, and they're kind of timeless because you're talking about something that's really relationships. You can talk about them any time of the
For
year.
sure. Yeah.
But to circle back, I'm not sure, because I'm a person who's always looking forward. I'm always looking to like, what's the next thing I want to do. But I don't know if the people want it. Listen, I will sit down and talk about people's relationships all they want. But I haven't made that plan yet. I think what I wanted to do is just establish myself here. Like, you have to remember, everybody who's been on the show has been here. This is their 11th season. So I felt like when I started, what I needed to do was put all my focus into just doing this
Totally.
job well. And so I want to do that and establish myself, and introduce myself to the audience. And then when I feel like I've kind of like a little bit more settled, then I think I'll start thinking about all the other side projects.
Totally fair. So how did your like personal schedule, time management, all that kind of stuff change when you joined the social? Because now you have like this thing that happens every day at a
Oh,
certain time.
that's a solid question. I still haven't figured it out. You know what? Because prior to this, I was doing news. People don't know I was working at News Channel. I went back to news after working in lifestyle for a very long time, and I was doing mainly the morning shift. So I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be done work by between, depending on the show, between 9 or latest 11:30 in the morning. So then I'd have the rest of the day to figure myself out, do little things, and then when you're freelance, you kind of do a little bunch of different things. So then all of a sudden I didn't realize I hadn't been in a Monday to Friday kind of 9 to 5 job. And the first couple of weeks, first of all, I was exhausted. Um,
Yeah.
and then secondly, I was like, oh, I have to really think about how I'm going to spend my time. And, time management is so key. So I'm still kind of figuring it out. And just like,
Yeah.
I'm working with a bunch of great people who I want to talk to all day. And sometimes I don't leave here till 5 o'clock because I'm in some conversation with the people from the good stuff or from eTalk. So, because there's a real, people don't see
Yeah.
this, there's a real family that works here that is like they're the absolute best, and we have so much fun. We have quiz shows. We do all kinds of random stuff here.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to like figure out like how to balance it all, but I just take it day by day.
What does like self-care, personal care look like for you when you're away from all this?
Oh, okay. I love this question because I'm going to the spa this Friday. I'm all about going to the spa.
I
I
know,
will
me
go to
too.
I will go to I've done cold plunges. I will do a cold plunge with a sauna. I've done that. Um, Also, remember when I think this is also the added benefit of being single and not having children. When I get home, I literally unplug myself socially. Like if someone calls me and I go, I'm going to bed, I'm not actually going to bed. What I'm saying is I'm done talking and socializing for the day,
Yeah.
and I just need silence. So
Yeah.
that's also part of my self care. I journal all the time just to kind of like sometimes, you just have, daily frustrations or things you need
Yeah.
to work through. But I love a good spa and I love a good vacation and I want to go back to Vegas and vacation, spa, and cold plunges and just I stopped talking like probably by 7:30, 8 o'clock. Just
Nice.
getting head nods and yeah, there's a lot of mm-hmm. We'll deal with that tomorrow.
I
So yeah,
love that.
yeah.
So you talked about a lot of like celebratory moments
Mm-hmm.
and happiness. What about some challenges that you've
Oh,
faced in your career? I know that we all have tons of
oh.
challenges, but like maybe one that really informed the way you move forward or changed something.
Okay. Oh God. Okay, I gotta be mindful of how I tell this story. So there was a time where I was in the city because people don't see this. They see this the highs, but they don't see the lows. And there was a time in my career where I just felt like I'd hit that glass ceiling and I wasn't getting any other opportunities, and I was super frustrated.
Yeah.
And you know, unfortunately, in television, especially Canadian television, once there is already a woman of color working on a show, you kind of know instinctively that you can't apply for any job that comes
Fuck.
up there.
Yeah.
That's the no. It's not great, but it's the reality. So
Yeah.
there was a time where every show had their black girl, and I was just kind of like, okay, what am I doing here? I love this career, but maybe I should have done something else. And I left this industry and even applied and started to a human resources program. And my instructor was like, "What are you doing here?" So that didn't last very long. But I opened my eyes to be like, it's not just here. You can work in other places. And I got myself a U.S. agent. And that helped me immensely because when I started, all of a sudden, when that door swung open, I was getting opportunity after opportunity to fly down. I had an audition where I flew to LA, auditioned for 5 hours, craziest audition ever.
Yeah.
Everybody was there. Everybody. Like, I'm like, oh my God, why is the guy from Survivor here? Like, it was insane the amount of people who I see on TV who were in that room, auditioned for 5 hours, and then got back on a plane and came back home. But it was that kind of seeing myself and kind of being like, woe is me, everybody has a job but me. And then kind of like, you know what? It's not just here. There are other places you can go. And then I got to work at this place called Real Channel in LA and covered every single major red carpet, the Oscars, all of it. And I was like, I had to stop kind of being sad about the situation and be like, okay, so what else can you do? Well, there's another avenue, go for it. And that's always helped me, that kind of mentality, like just pivot, just go
Yeah.
do something else. You're gonna be okay. So that helped me.
Yeah, I've
Mhm.
heard about the American agent thing a few times on this podcast.
Yeah.
What's going on with the Canadian agents? I guess there aren't really many.
Well, the Canadian agent can only get you work that is here,
Yeah, yeah,
and we have a much smaller market, whereas in the U.S. it's
yeah,
a much larger market. There are a lot more opportunities, and frankly, they're not afraid to have more than one
yeah,
person of color on a panel or on a show. So
yeah.
that opportunity was great. But that audition in LA, most insane thing I've ever been through in my entire life. They were literally just
Yeah,
calling us randomly into a room.
yeah,
You, come in. All right, answer this question. And you answer the question. Everybody's like, ha, putting on an act. And then they'd be like,
yeah,
okay, you can go home. You can go home. You can stay. And it was like,
yeah,
it was insane. When I got back on the plane, I was like, what was that? But it was
yeah.
the best. It was the best.
So one of my best friends, who's a radio broadcaster, black woman, second day of February, she's like, "For fuck's sakes, how many more days of this month are left?"
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since you're on the topic of, being a black woman, how does something like February, I'm not even going to say it. How does that happen for you? And do you find that there are moments where you're like, "Really?" Like so obvious.
Well, it's very okay. Black History Month, of course, I'm glad that we have it. But of course, every black person will tell you, if we had written the history books properly, we
Yeah.
wouldn't need this month. So that's the first thing. So that's always, it's a double edged sword.
Might
I'm like, I'm
try.
glad we have it, but if we were just honest about what happened in our countries, we wouldn't have to have a
Yeah.
special month that we kind of focus. But that's
Yeah. Yeah.
another story. But honestly, I feel like ever since 2024 started, it has not, like, it entered the room and it hasn't sat down yet. Like, for the Black community, if you're like into Black Twitter and all the things that have been going on with Monique and Cat Williams and Kelly Rowland at the Today Show, it's just been insane. And everybody's kind of saying like, this isn't happening during Black History Month, is it? It's like, yes, it's happening during Black History Month. But I think it's
Yeah.
important to celebrate at the same time. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, just with all the conversations, especially the ones that we have on the show about everything that's happening in the world, we realize it's like this reimagining of history, or this, our eyes being opened as to the history that we were like never told about. That is bothering me more. And I know some people are like, oh, why do we have to have a month? It's like, we have to have a month because people weren't treated fairly. The history books eliminated the names of a lot of people who are very important. So now we have to circle
Yeah.
back and remind everybody.
Yeah.
So it's challenging to have those conversations, and especially in a show, these TV shows are great, but you never get enough time to really get to the heart of the issue. But again, I'm just glad we're having the conversation, because there were
Yeah.
years on television where these conversations were not happening.
At
So
all. Yeah.
yeah.
Is there a Black woman that you really look up to in showbiz?
Oof. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh
So
my gosh.
many.
You know what? Okay, so, and no offense to any Black Canadian television hosts, there weren't a lot of us when
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
coming up. So there weren't a lot of like, oh, she was great. There weren't a lot of us, but so we always had to look to the United States. And I know everybody's expecting me to say Oprah. I actually have a, I'm a vent my frustration here. When everybody's like trying to compare themselves to Oprah, oh, you're the Canadian Oprah. No, you're not. You're not. You're a lot of things, but you're not that. Oprah is in a category all her own, just like Michael Jordan in basketball is in a category all his own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think just always the women who were like Black women, God, they were so in the United States. Like whenever I would be in the U.S., I would just watch because I was just amazed as the number of Black women who I saw on air. So they all collectively, whether I knew their names or not, were always inspiring me. I'm like, oh, this is happening over here. And not just the ones who are in front of the camera. I cannot tell you how many times, because I would go to these journalism conferences all the time. I would be meeting women. I remember I met this one woman. She was like 2 years older than me, and she was the VP of news at ABC in New York. And I could not stop staring at her because I was like, do you know how huge that is for you to
Yeah.
be in that position? And she was just looking at me like, because for her it's very common to see women of color in those managerial positions. And I'm like, I've been in Canadian television for almost 20 years, and I've never seen a woman of color in a job at that level
Right.
ever.
Yeah.
So not just women in front, but also women behind have been actually to me more inspiring than anything else.
I love that so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I usually end all of my episodes asking you about a few women that you would love to nominate to come on the show, and like, hey, you nominate Oprah, but we're never going to get her. You nominate people that you have relationships with, people that you would love to hear more about their story, people you admire.
You know what? I'm gonna name these two women. One
Okay.
of them I actually just met today, but I've
Cool.
she's a fascinating story. Her name is Sarah Nurse. She's a professional Canadian hockey player. She is also a Black woman who comes from a legacy of athletes.
I literally have an interview request in for her, just so we're aware.
She's okay. First of all, like she didn't tell me this. She's amazing. She was wonderful. She did so well on the show today. So she's
Yeah.
another woman that I'm like. Also, when I think about hockey players, I growing up, I never thought about a young Black woman playing hockey, and I think it's really important. I like that she's there, because I think when you see yourself somewhere, when you see someone who looks like you somewhere, it kind of gives you that encouragement. It's like, oh, maybe I could try this sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think she's super important. And another woman who's gone from playing professional hockey to now being a commentator is Soraya Tinker. So those
I
two
also
women,
have a request in for
those
her.
two women, listen, those two women are remarkable, because
Yeah.
again, when you think about sports and you think about Black women, most people think about what? Track and field, basketball, volleyball, all these other sports, but
Yeah.
hockey is probably not going to make the list. And right now we have these two women who are fantastic and dominating in the sport, and now moving
Yes.
into on air, which is like in Canada, which is wonderful. So I'm nominating those two powerhouse women because they're amazing.
I love that. Do you play any sports?
I was more of a debate club, drama club. I was a cheerleader on a co-ed team
Yeah.
where we did like stunts and stuff, but
Yeah.
anything with a ball I really wasn't into. But now as I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Like I signed myself up. Actually, Soraya, I'm blaming her. I've signed myself up to join a Black Women's Hockey League.
Oh shit.
Pray for me. I don't know what I was like when I saw it in the email. It sounded like a great idea, and then I was like, wait a second. These
Yeah.
people don't even have teeth. Like, what am I? What did I just sign up for?
And you've never played hockey.
Ever. Like outside of gym class? No. But I signed myself up. Pads, everything, skates. Like, can you skate? I'm like, yeah, like skate
Can you
like
hold
the
my hand while
biggest
we
stick.
do it?
I'm like, now with pads and a stick and I gotta hit them. And they're like, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Use the stick as balance. I go, we'll see. But you know what? I like to push myself to try new things,
Yeah.
and I will wear a mouth guard because teeth are expensive and I'm not messing with mine.
One last question for you and your teeth. Do you have a wish for women in this industry?
That's such a good question. I hope for women in this industry to continue to get paid what they're worth,
Fuck yeah.
to be seen and given opportunities wherever they want to be in our industry, whether it is behind the camera or in front of the camera. Because I think a lot of people just naturally assume when they see a woman in our industry that she's desperate to be in front of the camera, and that's simply not true.
Yeah.
And we need more executive producers, we need more directors, we need more ads, we need more camera, we need women in all of those positions. um and also for there to be more work-life balance for women who do choose to be in this industry and have a family and have kids, and for them not to feel like they have to choose one or the other, because this industry is not always kind to women who have, babies and a
Yeah.
life that they want to attend to. So that's what I would love to see in the future.
Thank you so much for making the time. I loved everything you
Oh,
said on this podcast.
thank you. Thanks for having me. Sorry that you had to chase me. You don't have to chase me anymore. I'm right here.
Oh, it's all good.